This here is my 1978 Chevrolet Silver Rattle. Back in the day, it was assembled by quarter horses and tornadoes. But fast forward to today, it's rough. Bieri cried in front of a rusty old car that once belonged to a family. He had fixed cars in the snow, pulled them from barns, and brought dead engines back to life. But this car felt different. It wasn't just metal. It was full of memories. Tune in, because just when he started to feel whole again, someone stole a rare part he had saved for years. Rust silence in the garage that wouldn't quit. Derek dragged lifeless machines out of barns, fields, and forgotten corners of America. Not with a crew, not with a script, just his hands, his brain, and whatever was lying around. People loved it because it felt real, because it was real. Vice Grip Garage wasn't a brand. It was a belief that broken things can run again. That busted bolts still have purpose. That little dirt and a lot of grit can outshine chrome. But something changed, and it wasn't part of the plan. But grit wears down. Even steel bends under pressure. And somewhere between the late nights, the long drives, in the constant race against rust, something cracked. It wasn't loud. It didn't break in a blaze of fire or smoke. It just quietly gave out like an old hose splitting under the strain. It was easy to miss at first. A skipped upload, a shorter episode, a half-joking reference to being tired. We're gonna go out there with the light, try to crawl under this thing. We'll take a jack, jump in the side-by-side, go out to Rusty Acres and see if they even look remotely close, and if they do, which they should be. But the real followers, the ones who watched every frame, heard every sigh under the jokes, they noticed. Derek was still smiling, still wrenching. But something behind the eyes said he was running low on something. Not skill, not drive, maybe time, maybe energy, maybe both. And then he moved from the frozen flats of Minnesota to the rolling warmth of Tennessee. On paper, it looked like a smart call. Better weather, longer wrenching seasons, less frostbite. But the shift was deeper. Tennessee wasn't just about climate. It was about breathing. About stepping off the gas just long enough to remember why you hit it in the first place. About seeing your son ride a dirt bike through the grass while you're under a truck and thinking maybe that's what legacy looks like. The answer was simpler and harder. He was burned out. Not the dramatic kind. No explosions, no breakdowns. Just that quiet creeping fatigue that crawls into your bones after years of grinding. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't scream, it just lingers. Derek had spent so long fixing everything around him that he forgot to look under his own hood. And when he finally did, he found something that scared him more than any seized engine ever could. Emptiness. That's when things got weird. Cryptic posts, random updates. Fans guessed what was going on behind the curtain. But Derek never really liked the curtain. He wasn't hiding. He was just choosing which parts of the story to share. Because when your whole life is out there, every mistake, every triumph, every rusted fender, it's hard to know where you end. The camera begins. This 1979 Fox Body Mustang, of course, it doesn't run, and it's been off the road for 23 years. So, I'm gonna try to get this thing fired up, put it back on the road, and attempt to drive hundreds of miles back home. Behind the scenes, the garage was still moving. Projects didn't stop. Ideas kept coming. But the pace changed, not slower, just smarter, more intentional. Derek wasn't trying to post the algorithm. He was fixing what needed fixing inside the shop and inside himself. Every project had to mean something again. Every bolt needed to matter. Every video needed to feel like a handshake, not a billboard. And then came the Mustang. An old frozen block of steel that hadn't breathed in decades. Buried under snow, rust, and doubt. It was the kind of car Derek couldn't resist. The kind that looked at you and dared you to try. He pulled it out of the barn like a man possessed. Snow bit at his hands. Ice clung to every surface, but he kept moving. Because that car, that wasn't just a build. It was a battle cry. He only had one day, one shot. A snowstorm was closing in. Tools were freezing in his hands. The clock was laughing. But Derek didn't flinch. He stripped the wiring. Replaced what could be replaced. Coaxed the fuel system back to life. The spark plugs hissed. The tank groaned. He rapped his knuckles, bit through the cold, and pushed. And when that engine coughed and finally roared, it wasn't just a victory. It was a message. Vice Grip Garage was still alive, still breathing, still dangerous. But the story didn't end there. The Mustang lit a new fire, but it also brought something else. Reflection. Derek began to see the shape of his journey. The curve of a road that started in North Dakota's farmlands and wound its way through corporate offices, quiet despair, and finally back into the warmth of grease and tools. So anyway, that's great. I didn't really get to listen if it was making oil pressure. Was it banging around? I don't know. There's so many things happening at once. He started talking about burnout not just with close friends but subtly in the work. You could hear it in the way he described the process. Less rushed, more grounded, like a man who realized that some engines only run when you let them rest. The videos returned not faster, not more often, but fuller. Each project had weight. Every rescue had a heart. And behind every turn of the socket, there was a quiet promise. I'm still here, still building. Then came the theft. It wasn't dramatic. No alarms, no confrontation, just gone. A carburetor, rare, valuable, essential, lifted from the property like a ghost in the night. For a man who'd built his entire platform on honesty, trust, and grit, it felt like a punch to the chest. But he didn't fold. He didn't rant. He didn't spiral. He reached out, and the community reached back. Within days, his followers raised $55,000 as a reward. Not because they were angry, but because they cared. Vice Grip Garage wasn't just a channel. It was theirs too. Every clunk, every backfire, every hard-earned ignition shared. It wasn't just about the carburetor anymore. It was about loyalty, about shared belief, about the garage as a living, beating thing. The thief never showed, but something else did. Proof that when you build with heart, people notice. And when you're honest about the struggle, they don't run, they rally. Derek tightened the bolts. Jessica steadied the sails. Bentley, with his dirt bikes and tiny tools, reminded them all that the future of the garage had hands small enough to grow into greatness. But when one job ends, another starts. This time with a missing part in a deeper quiet. A camera, a carburetor, and the storm that almost took it all. The Mustang may have roared, but the silence hadn't fully lifted. After years of running full throttle, Derek Bieri wasn't just fixing the engines anymore. He was fixing momentum. The kind of momentum that sneaks up on creators like a slow leak. You don't hear the hiss at first, but one day you wake up and realize the tires are flat. He didn't call it burnout, not out loud, but it showed up anyway in the missed uploads, in the way he paused longer between words, in how the garage lights stayed off just a little longer in the mornings. Even the loyal followers noticed it. The ones who knew the rhythms of Vice Grip Garage like a favorite song. They sensed the drag in his voice, the heaviness in his steps, the moment when the grease on his hands didn't shine with the same old fire. And just when things started to stabilize, the storm hit. It didn't come from the sky. It came from the edges. Those blurry, toxic corners of the internet, where assumptions become truth and whispers become headlines. It began with a joke. Derek called an old project the lawsuit. Just a one-liner, a passing moment. But some took it literally. Rumors flared. Was he being sued? Was Vice Grip Garage in trouble? Were the wheels about to come off the whole thing? The truth? No lawsuits, no lawyers, just the usual internet wildfire. Fast, hot, and mostly smoke. But smoke still stings for a guy who built his world on authenticity. The rumors hurt, not because he feared being misunderstood, but because he hated wasting time on noise. Hey, I think we got it. Our redneck alignment here. We got her just a scotch toe in. Ride height didn't change. Wheels are centered. Look amazing. Feeling good about it. Every second spent addressing gossip was a second lost under the hood. A second he could have used to teach Bentley something useful. A second Jessica could have spent without watching her husband's shoulders sink lower. And in that stillness, something started to grow again. Bentley, barely tall enough to see over the dash of a project car, was beginning to wrench. Not pretend wrench, real work, real grime under tiny fingernails. His YouTube channel, Little Grip Garage, wasn't just a gimmick. It was a miniature legacy in miniature. Watching him was like watching a black and white photo come to life. Every move echoed. Derek's early days. The curiosity, the stubbornness, the refusal to walk away just because something looked too far gone. And then came the carburetor. It vanished without warning. One of those rare pieces, a part you can't just buy again. It was stolen right off the property, like a ghost had walked in and walked out with history in its hands. The violation wasn't just mechanical. It was emotional. Derek had rescued that carburetor from a junk pile years ago, cleaned it, rebuilt it, gave it purpose again, and now it is gone. Not broken, not misused, just missing. The reaction was swift, not from Derek, but from his fans. They raised $55,000 in reward money. No flashy campaign, no drama, just solidarity. They weren't trying to be heroes. They just wanted to give something back to the man who had quietly inspired them to believe in second chances. The number wasn't what mattered. It was the message. You gave us your truth. We've got your back. Derek got back to work. The content shifted, not in quality, never that, but in tone. He wasn't racing to keep up with algorithms. He was creating what mattered, restoring what others forgot, honoring the machines that held stories in their rusted bones. He stopped asking what people wanted to see and started asking what felt worth doing. And as the projects rolled in one after another, so did the bigger question. What does success actually look like when the cameras stop rolling? That was a success. And in that version of success, something important happened. Derek stopped chasing. He started choosing. He chose the builds that mattered to him. The ones that told stories. The ones that reminded him of the old days on the farm when his dad would say things like, "Fix it or walk home." He chose videos that taught as much as they entertained. He chose honesty over polish, reality over production. And that's when Vice Grip Garage became something more than a YouTube channel. It became a blueprint, because people weren't just watching to see if an engine would start. They were watching to see if life could start over, if passion, scraped knuckles, and a little hope could actually build something that lasted. A carburetor and a service manual that's going to do nothing. So, let's take a second stab at the Cadillac here. See if we can get it fired up and down the road. Derek proved it could. But just when everything felt steady again, another project nearly broke him. It wasn't the hardest car. Not by specs, but by weight. Emotional weight. A battered, nearly forgotten family station wagon. No pedigree, no collector's market value. Just a machine full of memories. Derek found it rotting behind a collapsed barn in Arkansas. The story was muddy, half forgotten. My father used to drive it every Sunday. Then one day he didn't. The car sat for years sagging under weather and time. Derek loaded it up anyway. He didn't just fix it. He honored it. Every rusted bolt, every peeling emblem, treated with reverence as if every inch of the car still remembered the laughter of a family road trip or the quiet creak of a passenger door opened by a kid too small to reach the handle. By the time the station wagon rumbled to life again, Derek was crying. Not for the car, for what it stood for. The ghosts we carry, the memories we bury under layers of work, responsibility, and trying to keep up. That project didn't go viral. It didn't break the internet, but it broke something open in Derek. He realized Vice Grip Garage wasn't about cars. Not really. It was about people. About giving forgotten things a second chance. About showing others that you don't need money or credentials or perfection to build something beautiful. You just need a willingness to try, to get your hands dirty, to risk failure. The garage stayed open. The lights still buzzed overhead, but now the workbench was shared. Jessica's list hung beside Derek's notes. Bentley's tools sat beside his dad's. And in that garage, one socket wrench at a time, a new chapter was forming. Just when things felt steady again, the quiet came back. When the wrench slows down and the legacy speeds up, the kind of quiet that hangs in the air after the tools have stopped clanking for the night. When the garage lights flicker low and only the smell of gasoline and sawdust remains. That's where Derek found the truth of what he was doing. Not just reviving rusted metal, but preserving moments, lessons, a way of thinking. The algorithms wanted more. The audience wanted more. The pressure of digital relevance was like an oil leak you couldn't trace. Slowly draining, constantly demanding. That's when Derek did something unexpected. He hit the brakes. Not all the way. Not a screeching stop, but enough to pull over, step outside the digital highway, and check under the hood of his own life. He started saying no to projects that didn't speak to him. He scaled back filming schedules not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Too much to let his work turn into a product line. Too much to let the channel become just another loop of content fed to scrolling thumbs. And something strange happened. The work got better. Not flashier, not louder, just deeper. Every project had more patience in it. Every video carried more weight. And people noticed not millions more, but the right ones, the loyal ones. The ones who didn't just want to watch a car get fixed. They wanted to understand the why behind it. Derek started showing more of the process. Not just the victories, but the mess. The bolts that wouldn't move, the fuel lines that cracked, the frustrations that made him pace circles around a dying battery. He didn't edit them out. He invited the audience in. And in doing so, he reminded them all that building something real isn't always clean. It's slow. It's hard. And sometimes it means filming an entire day just to make one bolt turn. He started teaching more, too. Not with lectures, with experience. Since it's the 12th hour, and I literally have 3 weekends to do this, I'm going to pull this out and fix on it a little bit and see if we can figure out why it's using so much oil. Hopefully, it just rings. How to listen to an engine instead of just testing it. How to read the patterns in rust. How to guess the year of a machine by the way its screws were worn. It was never about facts. It was about feel. Derek had it, and he knew how to pass it on, not just to Bentley, but to anyone who bothered to watch with more than just their eyes. And Bentley, he was watching everything. Every move his dad made. Every fix, every fumble, every smile that came when something finally worked after 3 hours of failure. And Derek saw it. Saw the spark that had once lived in his own chest now lighting up behind Bentley's eyes. Not because he didn't want Bentley to follow the path, but because he knew how much it demanded. The sacrifices, the long nights, the pressure of doing what you love while everyone watches. But he also knew that if anyone could handle it, it was Bentley. Not because of talent, but because of heart. Jessica saw it too. She watched her husband rewire not just engines, but the entire way they lived. She knew the toll it took. The tension between work and rest, between sharing everything and keeping something sacred. But she never wavered. She was the still point in a turning world. The quiet partner who packed the lunches, managed the schedules, and reminded Derek with a look when it was time to step away from the bench and come back to the table. It wasn't a big project, just an old international pickup found in a cow pasture 2 towns over. Derek didn't expect much. The body was sagging, the tires were gone, and the engine looked like a mouse nest with bolts. But as he popped the hood, something hit him. The smell, the weight, the shape of the air. It reminded him of his grandfather's old truck. The one that sat behind the barn when he was a kid. The one they only moved once a year to make room for hay. He stopped filming. For a long time he just stood there looking, remembering. Then slowly he turned the camera back on. Not because he had something to prove, but because he had something to say. And the comments poured in. People who had forgotten their own stories suddenly remembered them. The car their dad drove. The truck their mom stole. The bike their brother wrecked on the last day of summer. Machines, yes, but also markers, chapters, anchors. Vice Grip Garage had officially become something more than content. It had become a mirror. But the internet doesn't pause. The wheel keeps spinning. Channels rise and fall. Trends eat their young. And still, Derek stayed steady. Because he wasn't chasing the wheel, he was building something off-road. Something harder to find, but impossible to fake. While others bought polished projects, Derek dragged rust out of the dirt. While some faked first starts, he showed every sputter, every misfire, every mistake. And people stayed. And not because it was perfect, but because it was real. But what if the real restoration wasn't the cars, but the man behind the wrench? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.